The graft trial against former eThekwini Mayor Zandile Gumede has also resumed at the Durban High Court. She and 21 others are all accused of unduly benefiting from a 300 million rand solid waste tender. Now, the trial has been set down until the 18th of August, but there have been already several delays there as well. eNCA's Dasen Thathiah has the very latest for us, and he joins me right now to give us, of course, those developments. Dasen, good morning to you, a colleague. Let's perhaps recap on what occurred yesterday and what's then expected today.
Well, Tumelo, it was the first day back after a few months' break. Remember, this trial is being dealt with in various sessions. We're now at a point where we should be at this court at least for the next month, as you mentioned. So yesterday was the resumption of the cross-examination of Shaun Hitler. Shaun Hitler is one of the employees at the city's Integrity and Investigations Unit. So just to remind our viewers, that is the unit where the complaint was first received, a complaint of possible suspicious activity in relation to tenders that were issued in the DSW matter. And it was at that point that Shaun Hitler was one of the people that had dealt with this complaint. It was assessed by him and the team at the CIIU, and it was later then outsourced and handed over to a forensic investigation team, in this case, namely the company IFS. And that really was how it all started. That's how it developed into a criminal case and ultimately got here to the trial. During that cross-examination yesterday by one of the defense attorneys, Jimmy House, he was basically trying to follow the path of his colleagues that were doing a similar type of thing during the last session. They were trying to look at the technicalities in relation to how that complaint and that investigation landed up with IFS, that company which was on a panel that was appointed by the eThekwini municipality to deal with these sorts of issues. So that was really where the focus was, on that process and whether all of the guidelines were followed. Jimmy House pointed out that according to the guidelines, 3 service providers should have been contacted. Shaun Hitler saying that the reason why they had chosen IFS was because they were already dealing with a matter involving one of the accused. So he was able to wrap up his cross-examination yesterday. There was another witness that was called up, but it was a very technical testimony that we were looking at there. He was talking about the specifics of how certain tenders were issued and signed off. So that was where the day ended yesterday, and there should be a continuation today as the state calls a new witness.
So touch on another expected witness, Mbuso Ngcobo. Dasen, he was meant to also testify. What do we know of his testimony, especially because he was, he's now the resigned, now former eThekwini City's head of Integrity and Investigations Unit. What's the status with his testimony?
That's exactly one of the key questions that has come up. In fact, right at the end of yesterday's proceedings, the state prosecutor did tell the court that they are not able to get Mbuso Ngcobo back onto the stand just yet. He had fallen ill the last time around, and that's why his testimony was cut short. We're now made to believe that he's still unable to continue with this testimony. So he had already started. Now, Mbuso Ngcobo's testimony was key. In fact, he was the person who quite literally signed off on that document after that complaint was received, essentially signing off to say that his team had made the right assessment and that this matter now needs to be handed over to forensic investigators for that investigation to continue. So right now his testimony is essentially parked, and I guess it would be until we hear through the state prosecutor whether he would be fit enough to take the stand again. Remember, he did resign because of those death threats. It's unclear now how that is going to affect his appearance at this court.
Yeah. Just my last question to you, Dasen, of course, as we touch on some of the processes rather involved in investigating, recommending and even remedial action in these allegations of misappropriation and corrupt activities within municipal office bearers. Let's talk more about them, perhaps giving more context in terms of the discrepancies that have led to this 300 million rand approximately solid waste tender out in Durban. Definitely we're here because there were discrepancies alleged.
That's exactly it, and that's why that complaint ended up turning into a full-blown investigation. That's according to those employees of the CIIU. They say that when they looked at this, they had first received a bundle of documents and just a post-it note. We've heard a lot about that, essentially pointing to those documents. And those documents allegedly pointed out these various discrepancies. For example, things like certain service providers that were appointed, the lengths of the contracts that were extended, and all of these things essentially becoming red flags, which then called for a deeper investigation, which ultimately uncovered what we saw now. Remember, the state is alleging in this particular matter that these implicated people, these accused here, were running a criminal enterprise within the eThekwini municipality. So essentially using the funds of the municipality, using ratepayers' money to fund this criminal enterprise and moving money from one entity to the next, essentially sharing it among all of them, with most of them receiving some form of benefit. The key players here that we're talking about are municipal employees, service providers, and this criminal enterprise allegedly headed by the former mayor, Zandile Gumede.